In the heart of a glittering city, where wealth sparkles brighter than the Christmas lights, a man who seemed to have everything discovered he had nothing at all. One cold December night, his path crossed with a little girl clutching her baby brother, shivering in the shadows of an alley. What began as a chance encounter would soon unravel into a story of survival, courage, and the rediscovery of purpose. This is not just about a millionaire CEO or a child lost in the snow. It is about how lives collide when hope seems impossible, and how even in the darkest places, love can be found. Stay with us, because this story will warm your heart in ways you never expected. And if you believe in the power of stories to heal and inspire, make sure you subscribe to the Retold Stories today. The champagne sparkled in his glass, cold and flawless, but it tasted like water. Michael Grayson stood among Boston's elite, the chandeliers above him glowing like constellations, the marble beneath his shoes gleaming as if polished by invisible hands. The party was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of a pianist delivering cheerful carols. Yet Michael felt like a ghost in his own kingdom, watching everyone else through glass that only he could see. Every smile directed at him bounced off his suit like hollow praise. He had wealth, status, a tower that carried his name into the skyline. But in that moment, he realized he had no anchor. A woman in sequins leaned toward him, whispering about mergers and forecasts. He nodded vaguely, his eyes straying toward the windows that framed the frozen city. He remembered when he was younger, when winter meant snowball fights and hot chocolate. Now, all it meant was isolation. The music grew louder, and yet it drowned in silence inside his chest. The longer he stood there, the more suffocated he felt, as if every golden light was exposing how empty his life had become. He placed the untouched champagne on a tray and slipped out without a word. Not even his driver followed. He wanted the night air, sharp and merciless, to cut through the fog of his mind. His Aston Martin roared to life, and he drove without direction, the city blurring past him. Towering glass buildings gave way to brick walls tagged with graffiti, Christmas lights sagging across abandoned storefronts like weary sighs. Here, the snow was not picturesque. It clung to cracked pavement and broken steps, a cold reminder of survival rather than holiday magic. Michael gripped the wheel, pushing farther from the life that had made him rich but left him hollow. He did not know what he was searching for, only that he could not turn back. Something darted into his headlights. His tires shrieked against ice as he slammed the brakes, his chest slamming into the restraint. In the narrow alley to his right, the beams caught a figure small and trembling. A girl, no older than 10, in a tattered red sweater with sleeves frayed to strings. Snow clung to her hair, which stuck to her cheeks, raw and reddened by the wind. In her arms, she clutched a baby swaddled in scraps of fabric. A plastic bag of crushed cans dangled from her wrist, stretched to breaking. She froze in the light, eyes wide, like a startled deer. Michael was out of the car before he realized he had moved. "Hey," he called softly, raising his hands in caution. "Are you all right?" The girl did not answer. The snow whipped sideways between them, biting into his face. But her gaze never wavered. Her brown eyes were wide but steady, watching him with a mistrust far too old for her age. She turned slightly, shielding the baby from him, as though she expected the worst. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Don't take him. I take care of him. I swear." The words shattered him more than if she had screamed. They were not the words of a child. They were the words of someone who had already lost too much, who had learned that trust was dangerous, that the world would always take before it gave. Michael's throat tightened. He crouched slightly, his voice cracking. "I am not here to take him from you. What is your name?" "Ruby," she said at last, clutching the bundle closer. He nodded gently. "And is he your brother?" "Yes," she whispered. "His name is Eli." Michael's eyes dropped to the baby. The tiny chest rose and fell unevenly. His lips were tinged with blue, and the faint rattle of breath filled the silence. Panic surged in Michael's veins. He had made million-dollar decisions in boardrooms, negotiated contracts under pressure, but nothing had prepared him for this. the fragile breath of an infant slipping away in a child's arms. He knelt into the snow, ignoring the sting through his trousers. "Can I help? My car is warm. You can stay with him the whole time." "Please, let me help." Ruby hesitated, her eyes flicking from Michael's coat to his watch, her mother's warning echoing in her mind. The bad ones wear nice clothes too. She held Eli closer, her body trembling from the cold. Michael reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out a handkerchief, then unwrapped his scarf, holding it out without touching her. The offer was quiet, without force, letting her decide. She looked at him, then at the baby, then back again. Slowly, she took the scarf, wrapping it around Eli's tiny face. Michael exhaled shakily. "Thank you," he murmured. "Now let me get you both warm." Ruby gave the faintest nod. With delicate care, he scooped her up, making sure she kept hold of her brother. She was lighter than he expected, fragile as porcelain, and yet she did not cry. She buried her face into the baby's blanket, whispering words he could not hear. He carried them to the car, laid them in the back seat, and turned the heater to full. His overcoat enveloped both children, a small tent of warmth against the storm outside. The baby whimpered faintly, and Ruby looked up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "Mama said not to trust men in suits," she whispered. "She said the bad ones wear nice clothes, too." Michael froze. Her words cut deeper than any insult ever could. He looked down at his coat, his polished shoes, the gleaming watch on his wrist. To her, he was the very danger her mother warned about. His chest ached as he whispered, "I am not him. I promise." Ruby did not answer, only pulled Eli closer. Michael swallowed hard, shifted the car into gear, and drove toward the one place he could think of: Street Mercy's hospital, a place his foundation had donated to for years. Not as a benefactor now, not as a businessman, but as a desperate man with two fragile lives in his care. Snow streaked across the windshield like frantic brushstrokes. In the rearview mirror, Ruby rocked her brother gently, her lips moving in silent prayer. Michael's jaw clenched as he realized the truth. If he had not turned down that street, if he had not stopped, both children would have frozen in the dark, and he would never have known. For the first time in years, Michael felt the weight of something real, pressing into him heavier than all the glass towers he had ever built. The hum of the heater filled the silence, but his mind raced faster than his car. He had no plan, no strategy, only one urgent thought: do not let them die. The automatic doors of Street Mercy's slid open with a whoosh, and Michael strode in, carrying both children wrapped in his coat. The nurses at the desk froze for a moment, stunned by the sight of an impeccably dressed man cradling a shivering girl and her barely breathing baby brother. "I need help," he said, his voice tight but steady. Within seconds, a team rushed forward. Hands reached for the infant, but Ruby cried out, panic slicing through her small frame. "Don't take him! Don't take him away!" she pleaded, clutching Eli desperately. Michael knelt beside her, his hand firm but gentle on her shoulder. "Ruby, listen to me. I am staying with him the whole time. I will not let them take him from you. Not now, not ever." His eyes locked with hers until she nodded, trembling. Only then did the nurses move, carefully easing the baby into warm blankets and oxygen masks. Michael stayed at Ruby's side, letting her grip his hand as though it were the only solid thing in the room. Machines beeped and monitors flickered. The words "severe hypothermia" floated through the chaos. Michael felt useless, standing in an Armani suit among professionals who knew how to fight death with skill and training. All he could do was hold on to Ruby and whisper that she was safe. He had written checks to this hospital, seen his name engraved on plaques, but none of that mattered now. This was no boardroom. This was life and death, and he had never felt more powerless. Hours passed like years. At last, a nurse stepped forward and said, "We are stabilizing him. He has a real chance." Michael exhaled, his chest shaking. He turned to Ruby, who had curled in a chair too big for her, the hospital blanket draped around her shoulders. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door where her brother was being treated, as though afraid that if she blinked, he would vanish. Michael sat beside her and placed another blanket across her knees. For a long while, neither spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Mama said not to trust men who wear suits." He looked down at the platinum watch on his wrist, polished and perfect, a symbol of everything that made him untouchable. Without a word, he removed it and set it on the counter, as though stripping away part of his armor. Ruby watched him quietly, then leaned ever so slightly closer. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a beginning. Later that night, a woman entered the room, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp yet warm. "I am Clara Jennings," she said softly. "I work with trauma cases." She glanced at Michael. "She will not talk, unless you stay." Michael nodded. Ruby clutched the blanket tighter as Clara spoke gently, asking about her mother. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Mama told us to run. She said they were coming, dressed like the good guys. She said if they get the bag, they get everything." Michael frowned. "What bag?" Ruby pointed to the plastic sack in the corner of the room, the same one she had clutched on the street. He picked it up, expecting scraps, and found crushed cans, a bent spoon, a photograph folded and water-stained. He smoothed it out, and his heart stopped. A smiling woman with dark hair, holding a baby. Beside her, a younger Ruby clung to her leg, and next to them stood a man in a Navy suit. Michael knew that man, Darren Cole, a fellow CEO, someone he had shaken hands with at galas, someone whose charm had always struck him as calculated. The room spun slightly. This was no case of homelessness or neglect. This was something darker. Ruby's voice trembled. "Mama said if he finds us, we disappear like she did." Michael's jaw clenched. Clara exchanged a glance with him, her eyes narrowing. "This changes everything," she murmured. The hours that followed blurred into exhaustion. Ruby refused to sleep, sitting vigil by her brother's side. Michael paced the corridors, unable to rest. He remembered his own past, the sister he had lost long ago, and how he had failed to save her. It was the echo of that wound that burned inside him now, sharper with every moment he looked at Ruby's weary face. He could not lose these children. Not when he had been given this chance to do what he had failed before. By morning, Eli's color had improved, his small chest rising more steadily under the warmth of hospital lights. Michael brought Ruby breakfast toast cut into stars, oatmeal sprinkled with cinnamon. She stared at the tray. "You cooked that?" she asked suspiciously. He almost laughed. "Not a chance. But I picked it out for you." Her lips twitched into the faintest smile before she whispered, "Thank you." As the day stretched on, Clara returned with new information. A woman matching Isa Moreno's description. Ruby's mother had been seen dragged into an unmarked vehicle. The car had no plates. The footage ended abruptly. Michael's stomach turned cold. Ruby stood by the window, her small hands pressed to the glass, her eyes distant. "She is not just lost," she whispered. She was taken. That night, Michael sat awake in the hospital's waiting lounge, Ruby's drawing folded in his pocket. She had sketched 3 figures beneath a Christmas tree, herself, the baby, and a tall man in a suit. He realized she had drawn him, not as a savior, but as someone who was simply there, present. His chest tightened. In a life built on numbers and contracts, he had forgotten what it meant to truly be needed. Clara approached quietly. "There is chatter about a warehouse by the harbor, one of Darren Cole's companies. It is not official, not confirmed, but there is movement." Michael's eyes darkened. "She is in there," he said. Clara cautioned him about risks, but he only shook his head. He had spent his life controlling deals, manipulating outcomes, always keeping the upper hand. Now, for the first time, control meant nothing. What mattered was a promise he had made to a child in a red sweater. Ruby had asked him once, "Why do you care?" He had not answered fully then, but the truth weighed on him now. He cared because he saw in her the shadow of someone he had lost. And because in her eyes, for the first time in years, he saw not fear of him but fragile hope, he could not let that hope die. The night wind off the harbor was merciless, whipping snow sideways in icy sheets. Michael pulled the zipper of a plain black jacket to his chin. the disguise far from his usual tailored armor. Clara crouched beside him behind a rusted container, her breath forming small clouds in the air. Ahead of them loomed a warehouse, squat and unmarked, its walls lit by the glow of a single flickering lamp. To anyone else, it looked abandoned. To Michael, it felt alive, tense, and waiting. Clara whispered into her radio. Movement confirmed. This is it. Michael's jaw tightened. He knew Isa was inside. The team moved quickly, shadows slipping along the side of the building. A door was breached with practiced silence, and they entered a space colder than the storm outside. The air stank of chemicals and rust. Broken machinery cast long, skeletal shadows. Clara pointed toward the far corner, where the thermal scan had marked life. Michael's pulse thundered. He had walked into countless deals, stared down ruthless rivals, but nothing had ever filled him with this kind of urgency. This was not profit. This was family. He did not wait for the signal. He pushed through the makeshift door and stopped cold. There, slumped against the wall, was Isa. Her wrists were bound, her face pale and hollow, strands of dark hair sticking to her damp cheeks. For a moment, she did not recognize him. Then her eyes widened, and she tried to rise, but collapsed against the wall. Michael stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around her trembling body, pulling her gently into his arms. "You are safe now," he whispered, though his own voice shook. She leaned into him, too weak to resist, too exhausted to question. Sirens wailed in the distance as federal backup closed in. Within minutes, medics were rushing Isa onto a stretcher. Michael held her hand until the very last second, whispering, "Stay with me." Her fingers twitched faintly, enough to anchor him in the storm of flashing lights and shouting voices. Back at Street, Mercy's, the hospital glowed with sterile light. Michael stood outside the room where doctors fought to stabilize Isa, his shoulders stiff, his eyes fixed on the glass as though sheer will could keep her alive. Clara approached quietly, clipboard in hand. "She is fighting," she said softly. He nodded, unable to speak, his throat too tight. At dawn, Ruby arrived, still in her oversized sweater, her hair tangled from sleep. When she saw Michael, she did not hesitate. She ran into his arms, her voice trembling. "She is here?" He knelt down and whispered, "Yes, she is alive." They entered together, Ruby clutching Eli against her chest. The sight of Isa opening her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks as she pressed her forehead to her daughter's, nearly undid Michael. He turned away, giving them a moment, but Isa reached out a trembling hand toward him. He stepped forward and took it, feeling a gratitude deeper than words, a bond sealed not by promises, but by presence. Later, Ruby handed Michael the filthy plastic bag she had carried through the snow. From it, she pulled a sock and unwrapped it to reveal a small USB drive. "Mama told me to keep it safe," she whispered. Michael closed his hand around it carefully. Clara's expression hardened. "If this contains what we think it does, it could expose everything." That night, Michael received a message from an unknown number. "Back off, or next time the kids disappear." A chill cut through him, sharper than the storm outside. He slipped the phone away and looked back into the hospital room, where Ruby was curled with her brother on the bed beside their recovering mother. He knew one thing: he would not back off. The sting operation came quickly. A decoy USB, a deserted freight terminal, and a team of agents ready to move. Michael insisted on being there, his eyes locked on the steel-paneled entrance as snow sliced through the night. Clara gave him a questioning glance, but he only said, "I need to see this through." When the black SUV rolled into view and Darren Cole stepped out, Michael's chest burned with a mixture of rage and clarity. Cole looked polished, confident, his arrogance intact until the trap snapped shut. Agents swarmed, and in seconds, the cuffs clicked around his wrists. For the first time, Michael saw fear in the man's eyes. "You set this up," Cole spat. Michael's voice was steady. "No. You did the moment you treated children as disposable." Back at the hospital, the halls no longer felt cold. Ruby waited for him in the playroom, her crayons scattered across the table. She looked up as he entered, her voice small but steady. "Did you find the bad man?" Michael knelt beside her. "Yes. He will not hurt anyone else." She studied him for a moment, then asked, "Are we going to stay with you?" The question hit him harder than any deal ever had. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, temporary guardianship papers he had signed that morning. "If you want me," he said softly, "I am yours." Ruby's eyes filled, and she wrapped her arms around him. "We do," she whispered. Christmas morning arrived quietly, sunlight spilling into the townhouse where cinnamon rolls baked and a crooked tree stood decorated with handmade ornaments. Ruby sat on the floor, in fuzzy socks, drawing another picture. On Michael's wall hung the first drawing she had given him, pinned proudly beside his awards. This one showed 4 figures hand in hand beneath a heart: Ruby, Eli, Isa, and Michael, a family not by blood, but by choice. Isa walked in, her voice soft but steady. Eli bundled against her shoulder. She looked stronger now, her smile no longer shadowed by fear. Michael handed Ruby a journal and new pencils, watching her eyes light up. "You found us in the trash," she said, her voice breaking but proud, "but you treated us like treasure." Michael knelt to her level, his throat aching. "You gave me what I could never buy," he whispered, "a purpose." That evening, as snow fell gently outside and laughter filled the rooms, Michael realized something profound. He had not just saved a family, he had found his own. There are moments in life when everything changes, not with thunder or fanfare, but with a quiet decision to stay, to protect, to love. Michael Grayson had built towers of steel and glass, but none of them mattered compared to a single fragile heartbeat in the snow. When he found Ruby and Eli, he thought he was saving them. What he did not realize was that they were saving him just as much. In their small hands, he discovered the weight of trust. In their tired eyes, he saw the reflection of a man he had almost forgotten how to be. Ruby's words echoed like truth carved into stone. "You found us in the trash, but treated us like treasure." That simple sentence carried the force of every boardroom victory he had ever won and shattered it, revealing what truly mattered: not profit, not power, but presence, the act of choosing to be there when it mattered most. For Ruby, for Eli, for Isa, Michael was not just a man in a suit anymore. He was family. This story is not only about survival against the odds. It is about transformation, the way love can bloom in the coldest winters, the way hope can be born in the unlikeliest places. It reminds us that wealth without compassion is empty, and that even the smallest gesture, a scarf offered in the snow or a hand held in fear, can change the course of a life. Maybe you see yourself in Michael, lost in the noise of success, forgetting what it means to feel. Maybe you see yourself in Ruby, holding on to courage when the world seems cruel. Or maybe you simply believe, as we do, that family is not only what you are born into, it is also what you choose, what you fight for, what you create in the spaces between brokenness and healing. The Retold Stories is a place for journeys like this, stories that remind us of the resilience of the human heart, stories that restore faith when the world feels heavy. If this tale touched you, if it stirred something deep inside, we invite you to stay with us, subscribe to the Retold Stories, and join a community where hope is never lost, where love finds its way through the darkest nights, and where every story leaves you not only moved, but transformed. Because at the end of the day, it is not about the mansions we build or the accolades we win. It is about the people we hold close, the promises we keep, and the moments we choose to love fiercely when it matters most. That is what lasts. That is what we carry forward. And that is why stories like this deserve to be told and retold.